It's a really curious thing to consider, isn't it? Studies suggest, I think, somewhere between 10, maybe 20% of people have had that very strange sensation of an out-of-body experience. But what happens after? What actually lingers once that detachment fades? Do these moments leave any kind of real psychological footprint?
That's the core question, really.
So today, on the deep dive, we're going beyond just, being curious about OBEs.
Yeah.
We're really digging into the complexities of their lasting psychological effects.
Indeed. And our exploration today focuses on a particularly revealing area: the psychological outcomes tied to dissociative and hallucinatory experiences.
Okay.
But specifically within the context of ritualistic ayahuasca consumption in Peru, which gives us a pretty unique lens.
Right, a very specific context. And the foundation for our discussion is this really compelling qualitative research study. So you can imagine these in-depth conversations with people who have actually taken part in these ayahuasca ceremonies.
Exactly.
And this isn't just like collecting stories. It's a proper academic inquiry using a phenomenological approach.
Yeah.
Specifically, I think, Mustaka's transcendental model to really get at the essence of these experiences.
That's right. It's about understanding the lived experience from their perspective, what it actually meant to them.
Got it.
So our aim today is sort of twofold. First, we want to understand how these different phenomena that people encounter during these altered states, that feeling of dissociation, detachment, encounters with what they perceive as metaphysical entities, how these might actually contribute to significant psychological changes. And second, maybe more crucially, we're interested in the underlying mechanisms, like what are the whats and hows that lead to these lasting shifts.
Okay.
So it's really a journey into consciousness, spirituality, maybe even the nature of reality itself, hopefully offering some insights for anyone, intrigued by these deeper aspects of being.
Okay, let's get into the specifics then. Ayahuasca, it's become a bit of a buzzword, hasn't it? But what are we actually talking about scientifically?
Right. So ayahuasca is this traditional psychoactive brew. Its origins are in the Amazon basin.
Okay.
And its Quechua name, Vine of the Dead, kind of hints at the profound experiences it can induce, often touching on themes like mortality and what people sometimes call ego dissolution.
Vine of the Dead.
Yeah. And while the exact plant mix can vary, the core psychoactive effect comes from this really fascinating synergy between two main botanical sources.
Synergy. Okay, so it's the interaction that's key. What are the ingredients doing?
Precisely. The main psychoactive compound is DMT, dimethyltryptamine. That comes from the Psychotria viridis shrub.
Right.
Now, DMT by itself, if you just ingest it, it isn't orally active because we have enzymes in our gut, MAOs, monoamine oxidases, that just break it down.
Oh, okay.
And that's where the second crucial bit comes in, the Banisteriopsis copy vine. That's the vine in Vine of the Dead.
Gotcha.
It contains harmala alkaloids, and these act as MAO inhibitors, so they temporarily block those enzymes.
Allowing the DMT to get through.
Exactly, allowing the DMT to reach the brain and exert its, powerful psychedelic effects. It's also worth mentioning the harmala alkaloids themselves are thought to have their own psychoactive properties, contributing to the whole visionary experience. So it's this carefully balanced natural pharmacology that really underpins the ayahuasca experience.
So this biochemical interaction that kind of sets the stage for these intense states, including the out-of-body experiences we're focusing on. But what makes the ayahuasca-induced OBEs particularly useful for this kind of psychological research?
Well, what makes them so compelling, I think, is the unique sort of constellation of experiences that often happen together during these OBEs. People frequently report not just the feeling of consciousness being separate from the body, but also things like connecting with beings they see as metaphysical entities, a sense of their consciousness expanding, sometimes seeing in 360 degrees anomalous lights, and significant feelings of dissociation.
Quite a cluster of phenomena.
Exactly. And these experiences tend to score pretty high on standardized OBE feature indices, which tells us there's a really rich, multifaceted range of these unusual phenomena happening.
Right.
And that complexity makes ayahuasca a really insightful way to study the link between OBEs and these lasting psychological changes.
And we should probably touch on the cultural and legal context too, shouldn't we? It's not just a chemical substance. It has deep roots.
Oh, absolutely. Ayahuasca has profound cultural and spiritual significance in the Amazon. Traditionally used in indigenous shamanic practices for healing, spiritual exploration. In Peru, its cultural importance is actually formally recognized. It's part of the nation's cultural heritage.
Okay.
But the legal status varies massively around the world. Like in the UK, DMT is a Schedule I drug, very restricted.
Right. Big difference.
Huge difference. So it's really important to stress that the research we're discussing today specifically involved people who legally consumed ayahuasca in ritual settings within Peru. That ensures ethical research practices.
Good.
And this legal landscape also kind of intersects with this growing phenomenon of shamanic tourism, people traveling from Western countries to the Amazon seeking these experiences for healing or spiritual growth or other reasons.
Right. That's a whole other dimension. Okay, so we've got a picture of ayahuasca, its unique effects. Let's dive into the methodology. How did the researchers actually go about trying to understand the psychological impact?
Okay, so the study used a qualitative research design. At its heart were semi-structured interviews with 7 individuals, all of whom had legally participated in these ritual ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru.
7 people.
And the emphasis on qualitative here is really crucial. The aim wasn't to generalize findings to, everyone. It was to get a deep, nuanced understanding of the subjective lived experiences of these specific participants.
So depth over breadth.
Exactly. It lets you explore these complex phenomena in a really rich, detailed way, capturing individual nuances that, quantitative methods might just skim over.
And I suppose with just 7 participants, you can really go deep. Some might think that's a small number for research, though.
It might seem small if you're used to large surveys, but in phenomenological research, like the kind guided by Mistaka's model, the focus is really on the richness and depth of the data from each person.
Right.
The idea is that a smaller, carefully chosen group can actually provide really profound insights into the essential nature of an experience. The researchers wanted a deep exploration of something relatively understudied.
Okay.
And it's worth noting there was actually quite a bit of diversity within that small group. Ages from 18 to 50, different jobs, different religious backgrounds, different levels of prior ayahuasca experience. That adds richness, too.
Makes sense. And these interviews, they weren't just casual chats, right? There was a structure.
Precisely. They used a semi-structured interview protocol. So there were guiding questions designed to get participants talking in detail about their experiences.
Like what kind of questions?
Questions asking them to describe the experience itself, to pinpoint moments they felt were particularly significant or profound, and then to reflect specifically on any psychological changes they'd noticed.
In different areas of life.
Yeah, across various domains, like their views on death, the divine, their sense of self, relationships with others, their overall worldview, lifestyle, their connection to nature.
Comprehensive.
Very. And importantly, they also asked about this specific OBE-related phenomena, dissociation, encountering entities, expanded consciousness, weird lights, that kind of thing. But they kept it flexible, allowing for follow-up questions, exploring themes as they came up, really trying to get rich detail, especially on the links between the phenomena and the psychological outcomes. Interestingly, the researchers kind of expected that the OBE-related stuff would come up naturally.
And did it?
It did, yeah. It seemed central to many of the accounts without needing heavy prompting.
Okay, so they gathered all this incredibly rich interview data. What then? How do you analyze narratives like that?
Right. The analysis followed Mistaka's transcendental phenomenological model. It's a pretty rigorous, systematic process.
Okay.
The first step is called epoch. This is where the researcher actively tries to bracket their own assumptions, beliefs, biases about the topic.
Sort of setting aside your own preconceptions.
Exactly. It's crucial for approaching the data with an open mind, letting the participants' experiences really speak for themselves, especially with something this subjective and potentially transformative.
I can see why that would be vital. What's next after epoch?
Next is horizontalization. Basically, you treat every statement in the interviews related to the experience as having equal initial value.
Yeah.
Then you go through meticulously and identify the horizons. These are the specific phrases that directly address the research questions and illuminate the experience. You set aside anything irrelevant or repetitive.
Got it. So you're filtering down to the core statement.
Right. Then these horizons are clustered into themes for each individual participant. These are called invariant constituents, the essential elements of the unique experience.
Okay, individual themes first.
Yes. Then you group these invariant constituents across all the participants into broader core categories of the phenomenon being studied.
Finding the common threads.
Exactly. And finally, there's imaginative variation. This is where the researcher reflects deeply on these core categories and constituents to really understand the underlying structure of how the psychological changes happened. It leads to developing this rich structural description of the phenomenon.
Wow, that sounds intense.
It is. And they mentioned using Quarkus software to help manage and analyze all this qualitative data, finding patterns and organizing themes.
Right. It's a very detailed step-by-step approach, moving from individual stories to common themes and trying to grasp the how in the psychological shifts. So let's get to the findings. What were some of the key psychological outcomes they identified, and what phenomena seemed linked to them?
Okay, one of the most significant outcomes was a change in the individual's view and a relationship to the divine.
Okay. How?
Well, encounters with what they perceived as metaphysical entities in these descriptions varied wildly. Sometimes symbolic figures, sometimes just a feeling of presence. These were often interpreted as validating the existence of the divine. It seemed to foster a more profound, personal, maybe transpersonal connection. For some, it felt like confirmation that went beyond just intellectual belief.
Interesting. And it wasn't just these sort of external encounters. Dissociation played a role too.
It did, yeah. That experience of dissociating from their usual sense of self during the OBEs for some participants led to this profound feeling of union.
Union with what?
With a larger consciousness. Some called it the universe, some used the word God. This feeling of interconnectedness often resulted in a fundamental shift in their perspective on the divine, sometimes aligning more with, say, Eastern or Buddhist ideas of a universal consciousness.
That sounds like a massive shift in understanding reality. What about something as fundamental as our fear of death? Did these experiences impact that?
Yes, quite significantly for some. Interactions with those perceived metaphysical entities, sometimes interpreted as ancestors or spiritual guides, seem to lead to a stronger belief in some kind of existence beyond the physical body.
Okay.
And that belief, in turn, often resulted in a noticeable drop in their fear of death. More peace, more acceptance about mortality.
And the dissociation itself, feeling separate from the body.
That too. For others, simply the sensation of consciousness being separate from the physical body seemed to reaffirm existing spiritual beliefs about life continuing after death. Again, lessening the fear of dying.
And I remember reading it wasn't universally positive regarding fear of death, some complexity there.
That's a really crucial point, yes. For some participants, the experience of dissociating from their sense of self, that ego dissolution, actually seemed to increase their fear of death, at least initially.
Really? Why?
It seemed linked to the perceived death of the ego, that struggle to let go of their ingrained sense of individual identity, of control. It felt like annihilation to them at first.
Wow. So while the OBE aspect might decrease fear, the ego dissolution part could actually spike it.
Exactly. It shows how the specific type of dissociative experience really matters for the outcome. It's nuanced.
Definitely underscores the complexity. Okay, let's move on to how these journeys affected the participants' view of themselves. What did the study find there?
Well, dissociating from the physical body led to slightly different feelings about personal significance. For some, that out-of-body view made them feel, less personally significant in the grand scheme of things, part of a much bigger picture. But for others, that same perspective seemed to foster more empathy. They started seeing themselves as more compassionate or fundamentally connected to others.
Interesting contrast. And again, what about dissociating from the self, the ego?
Right. For most, dissociating from their individual self led to that profound feeling of interconnectedness with the universe we mentioned earlier, feeling like part of a larger whole, not separate.
Which sounds potentially very positive.
Mostly, yes. But for one participant, it was extremely intense. It led to this deep questioning, almost a temporary obliteration of their sense of self. They apparently needed time afterward to integrate that and rebuild their identity.
So these aren't passive viewings. They can actively reshape self-perception, sometimes quite dramatically.
Yeah.
What about their view and relationship with other people? Did that change?
Yes. That dissociation from the self, leading to the transpersonal connection, often seemed to boost empathy and understanding towards others for several participants.
Makes sense if you feel more connected.
Right. It seemed to allow them to appreciate different perspectives, other people's experiences, more readily.
But again, were there different pathways? Did the metaphysical entities play a role here too?
It seems so. For some, messages or insights they felt they received from these entities prompted a slightly different shift.
How so?
Instead of just more empathy generally, they reported focusing more on their own well-being, maybe detaching a bit from other people's problems or dramas.
So a shift towards self-care or boundaries, perhaps.
Perhaps, yes. It suggests the specific content and how they interpreted the experience really shaped the relational outcome. It wasn't one size fits all.
It's quite remarkable, isn't it? How the same broad type of experience can lead to such varied, maybe even seemingly opposite, shifts in relating to others. What about their overall worldview? Did these experiences shake up fundamental beliefs about how the world works?
For some, yes. That profound ego dissolution, dissociating from the self, really seemed to challenge their basic assumptions about reality.
In what way?
It led them to question things they'd previously taken for granted, establish views on all sorts of topics, even, for a couple of them, their political beliefs.
Even politics.
Apparently so. It suggests these intense experiences can trigger a pretty fundamental reevaluation of one's place in the world and the principles you operate by.
So it's not just personal or spiritual insight. It can ripple out into how you understand society, reality itself.
Mm-hmm.
And did these shifts in perspective actually lead to changes in lifestyle?
Yes, that came through too. For some, that transpersonal connection, the increased empathy growing out of the dissociation from self, seemed to shift their values.
Towards what?
Towards adopting more selfless ways of being, becoming less materialistic, maybe more contemplative or passive lifestyles. There was a reported tendency to prioritize inner experiences over, say, external validation or acquiring stuff.
Sounds like a potential catalyst for some pretty significant personal growth, a reevaluation of life's priorities. Okay, finally, what about nature? Our connection to the natural world. Did the ayahuasca journeys affect that?
This was actually a really consistent finding across all 7 participants.
Oh, really?
Yes, that deep sense of interconnectedness they felt during dissociation from the self nearly always extended to the natural world.
How did that manifest?
Heightened appreciation, a profound feeling of connection with nature. Some even reported developing a belief in some form of plant consciousness.
Land consciousness.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It seems like when those ego boundaries blur, the sense of unity expands outwards, not just to other humans, but to all life, to the environment itself. A desire to be more immersed in nature.
It's like dissolving the boundary between self and other extends to self and world. Fascinating. Now, the study also mentioned some other findings and limitations, didn't it?
Indeed. One thing they noted was that there wasn't a really noticeable difference in experiences or outcomes based on how many times someone had done ayahuasca.
That is surprising. You might think more sessions equals deeper changes.
Right. It suggests maybe the depth or quality of a particular experience might matter more than just the cumulative number.
Interesting. And the limitations, always important in research.
Absolutely. They were careful to point out the small sample size, just 7 people. So the findings are specific to them, and you can't necessarily generalize to everyone who uses ayahuasca or has an OBE.
Right.
Also, the interviews were retrospective, people looking back. So their accounts could potentially be influenced by things that happened after the ayahuasca experience or just by time passing.
Makes sense.
The focus purely on ayahuasca-induced OBEs also means the findings might not apply to OBEs happening spontaneously or through other methods.
Good point.
And they acknowledge the potential for researcher bias, even though they tried hard to bracket assumptions using epoche. Plus, the interviews obviously didn't capture non-verbal aspects of the experience.
All important caveats.
Right.
And it was interesting that things like physiological changes during the experience or immediate feelings or even seeing lights or having 360 vision, these weren't identified as the main drivers of the long-term psychological changes they focused on.
That's right. While those things are definitely part of the overall intense experience, the analysis of what people said about the lasting changes pointed more strongly towards the role of dissociation from body and self and those encounters with perceived entities. Those seem to be the key catalysts for the enduring shifts in this group. It paints a really nuanced picture and actually highlights some differences from previous quantitative survey research, which just shows the value of this kind of in-depth qualitative work for understanding the subjective side.
Okay, so if we were to kind of synthesize all this, wrap up our discussion, what are the main takeaways from this deep dive into the psychological aftermath of these ayahuasca OBEs?
Well, I think this study really powerfully highlights the significant role that dissociative experiences play, both that detachment from the physical body and maybe even more profoundly, the loosening of the boundaries of the self, the ego.
Hmm.
And alongside that, the impact of encounters with what people perceive as metaphysical entities. These phenomena really seem instrumental in facilitating significant, lasting psychological changes.
Across quite a range of areas.
Exactly. Across views on death, the divine, self-identity, relationships, worldview, lifestyle, even connection to nature.
It really sounds like these aren't just fleeting altered states. They can be genuinely transformative experiences, offering these profound aha moments that can fundamentally reshape how people see themselves and their place in the universe.
Precisely. This research gives us a really fascinating, valuable glimpse into how these intense experiences might catalyze significant personal growth, a real reevaluation of core beliefs and values.
Yeah.
But of course, we have to acknowledge the complexity here and the limitations of this kind of initial qualitative look. More research, definitely, with larger, more diverse groups, is needed to really deepen our understanding of these intricate connections and the longer-term implications.
Absolutely. So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given that these profound shifts in self-perception and worldview can arise from experiences as intense as these ayahuasca-induced OBEs, what other paths might exist? What other, perhaps less dramatic avenues might be available in our everyday lives for achieving similar deep insights and fostering real personal growth? It's a question that kind of invites us to look for the potential for transformation that might just lie within, even outside the realm of the extraordinary.